The Graystone Asylum stood on the outskirts of town, its looming silhouette a constant reminder of the past. Built in the early 1900s, it was meant to be a place of healing for the mentally ill. Instead, it became a house of horrors. Reports of mistreatment, unethical experiments, and unexplained disappearances plagued its history. But it wasn't until the ghostly attacks began that the asylum was finally shut down. The building had been abandoned for decades, left to decay and be consumed by nature. Yet, stories persisted. Local legends spoke of the asylum being haunted by the spirits of those who suffered within its walls. These tales attracted thrill-seekers and paranormal investigators alike, drawn by the allure of uncovering the truth behind the haunting. One such group was composed of 4 friends: Marco, Alessandra, Pietro, and Lucia. They were seasoned urban explorers with a passion for the paranormal. The idea of exploring Graystone Asylum excited and terrified them. They planned their visit meticulously, making sure they had all the necessary equipment to document their findings. The night they chose was cold and moonless. The asylum loomed ahead as they made their way through the overgrown path. The air was thick with an eerie silence, broken only by the crunch of their footsteps on the dead leaves. As they approached the entrance, Alessandra took out her camera and began filming. "Here we are," she whispered, the camera's light illuminating the cracked and weathered facade of the asylum. Graystone Asylum, where the spirits of the past still linger. They stepped inside, the air immediately cooler and damp. The smell of mold and decay was overwhelming. They moved through the main hallway, their flashlights casting long shadows on the walls. The asylum's interior was a maze of dark corridors and abandoned rooms, each holding remnants of its grim history. In the old records room, Pietro found patient files scattered across the floor. He picked one up and read aloud, "Patient 432. Admitted for severe hallucinations and violent tendencies. Treatment, isolation and electroshock therapy." Lucia shuddered. "No wonder this place is haunted," she said. "Imagine the suffering these people went through." As they delved deeper into the asylum, the atmosphere grew more oppressive. They reached the treatment wing, where the most disturbed patients had been kept. The walls were lined with rusted metal doors, each leading to a tiny cell. The faint smell of burnt ozone lingered, a reminder of the electroshock treatments that had been administered there. Marco, who had been unusually quiet, stopped in front of one of the cells. "Do you guys hear that?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. They all strained to listen. At first there was nothing. Then faintly, they heard it. A soft, almost inaudible whispering. It seemed to come from all around them, yet nowhere at the same time. "Is that the wind?" Alessandra asked, her voice shaking. Pietro shook his head. "No, it's something else. Something not natural." They continued, the whispers growing louder, more insistent. As they reached the end of the corridor, a cold gust of wind slammed the door behind them. They turned to see the doors of the cells slowly creaking open, one by one. "Let's get out of here," Marco said, panic creeping into his voice. But as they turned to leave, a figure appeared at the end of the hallway. It was translucent, a ghostly apparition of a man in a doctor's coat. His face was twisted in an expression of rage and pain. He pointed at them, his mouth moving silently, but the whispers in the air grew louder. Lucia screamed and bolted for the exit, the others close behind. They ran through the labyrinthine corridors, the ghostly doctor following them, his figure flickering in and out of existence. The whispers turned into wails, echoing through the halls, merging with the frantic pounding of their footsteps. They burst out of the asylum, gasping for breath, hearts racing. They didn't stop running until they reached their car. As they sped away, Alessandra glanced back at the asylum. In the rearview mirror, she saw the doctor standing in the doorway, watching them leave. For days after, they couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Strange things began to happen. Doors would open and close on their own. Cold spots would appear in their homes, and at night, they heard the same whispers they had heard in the asylum. They realized that something had followed them, an echo of the asylum's dark past. Desperate for answers, they researched the asylum's history. They discovered that the attacks on the doctors had been attributed to the vengeful spirits of the patients who had died under their care. The asylum had been shut down, not just because of the attacks, but because the doctors themselves had begun to lose their minds, driven mad by the relentless hauntings. One by one, the friends began to succumb to the same fate. Marco was the first to go, found dead in his apartment, a look of terror etched on his face. Next was Lucia, who vanished without a trace, leaving behind only her camera, its last recording filled with the same ghostly whispers. Alessandra and Pietro, now the only ones left, decided to return to the asylum, hoping to put an end to the nightmare. Armed with sage and holy water, they ventured back into the darkness. Inside, the whispers welcomed them. They moved through the asylum, retracing their steps, until they reached the treatment wing. The doors were still open, and the air was thick with malevolence. They confronted the ghostly doctor, who appeared before them once more. This time, they were ready. They chanted prayers, burning the sage and sprinkling the holy water. The doctor screamed, a sound of pure agony, and began to dissolve into the air. As he vanished, the asylum seemed to exhale, the oppressive atmosphere lifting. The whispers ceased, and the cold spots disappeared. They left the asylum, hoping they had finally laid the spirits to rest. But the nightmares never stopped. The ghostly doctor still haunted their dreams, a reminder of the horrors they had uncovered. They had escaped the asylum, but its echoes would follow them forever, a sinister reminder that some places are better left forgotten. And somewhere, in the darkness of Graystone Asylum, the whispers began anew, waiting for the next curious souls to venture inside.